Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Protests over immigration arrests have spread across the United States, including New York, Atlanta and Chicago. Meanwhile, back in LA where protests started, arrests have been reported as a downtown curfew remains in place for another night. The US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says that 5 of its workers have been killed in an attack by Hamas. Gaza medics say that Israeli strikes and gunfire killed at least 60 Palestinians on Wednesday, with dozens killed near an aid site. Meanwhile, Israeli members of parliament have rejected a preliminary vote to dissolve the Knesset after an agreement was reached over a dispute over conscription. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has avoided an early election, with 61 lawmakers opposing the movement. US President Donald Trump says some US personnel are to be pulled from the Middle East because it could become a dangerous place amid tensions with Iran. Discussions over a nuclear deal with Iran have stalled, and they threaten to target US military bases if conflict breaks out. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says he is very happy with the trade deal which has restored a fragile trade truce with China. Meanwhile, President Trump says he is willing to extend the July 8th deadline for completing trade talks with countries before higher US tariffs take place. Public disorder has broken out in Northern Ireland for a third successive night, with buildings and cars set on fire as hundreds of masked rioters attack police. 32 officers have been reported injured, with violence erupting after 2 14-year-old boys were arrested accused of sexual assault against a teenage girl. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has vowed to continue supporting Russia in a message to Vladimir Putin for Russia Day. Kim calls Putin his dearest comrade while praising their genuine bilateral relations. Australia's Defence Minister says he is confident that the AUKUS submarine pact with the US and Britain will proceed after the Pentagon said it was reviewing the deal to make sure it aligns with Trump's America First agenda. In 2023, Australia committed to spend $239 billion over the next 3 decades. We start this hour in North America. Protests against US President Donald Trump's immigration raids are spreading across the US, despite warnings from the White House. In Los Angeles, demonstrators hit the streets for a 6th straight day as military troops stand by. Trump says he won't allow mob rule in America. His press secretary blamed California leaders for fanning the flames. Let's take a look at what the US press secretary had to say.
Well, President Trump was in contact with Governor Gavin Newsom despite some of the claims he's made in the last couple of days. The president called the governor on Friday evening and told him to let law enforcement in California do their jobs. And the Los Angeles Police Department, by the way, are fantastic people. They are trying to do the work that they've so bravely signed up to do, to enforce the law. But they have been kneecapped by incompetent Democrat policies. It's a good question the president is raising, and one we are looking into, about who is funding these insurrectionists and these rioters and these protesters and these illegal criminals. And I have updates for you on the numbers, by the way. Since June 6th, there have been 330 illegal aliens that have been arrested as part of these riots in Los Angeles. 113 of those illegal aliens had prior criminal convictions. And overall, and this includes arrests of American citizens, there's been 157 people arrested for assault and obstruction-related charges, including the attempted murder of a police officer.
Meanwhile, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth told lawmakers the deployment of over 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines is lawful and constitutional. While in Mexico City, President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed that 61 Mexican nationals have been detained. She slammed the US raids but denied encouraging protests or violence. Back in Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass says the unrest was provoked by the White House. She's demanding a direct conversation with President Trump. District Attorney Nathan Hochman pledged to protect peaceful protesters, but warned that violent offenders will face charges. Over a dozen people now face prosecution, including 2 men accused of throwing Molotov cocktails. At the same time, US Attorney Bill Asaili vowed more arrests after charging 2 men for throwing Molotov cocktails during these LA protests, warning rioters this is the beginning, not the end. Let's have a look at what Bill Asaili had to say.
This morning we are announcing that we have filed federal criminal complaints against 2 defendants who engaged in violence during the recent civil unrest. The last few days we have seen vicious attacks on our agents and our properties here in the federal government. The escalation of violence by these rioters poses a serious threat to our agents and the safety of the public. Throwing rocks, explosives, assaulting agents, and committing other acts of violence are extremely dangerous and will not be tolerated.
Well, on the military front, Major General Scott Sherman said Marines are not conducting arrests and will not carry live ammunition. He confirmed the troops are in training and will soon deploy to assist with civil disturbances. Here is what he had to say.
So, with our orders directed by the President, the Secretary of Defense has mobilized. Right now it's 4,700 personnel, so 4,000 from the California National Guard, 700 Marines. And our mission is to protect federal agencies, our federal partners.
Well, several updates there from the past 24 hours in LA and across the US. Joining us to discuss them is Adit Kataria, Foreign Affairs expert. Adit, thank you ever so much for joining us on the programme today. Let's first look at this dispute that's going on between Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass and the Trump administration. It's deeply divided between these politicians. It seems that one side is saying that the other is inciting these riots and making them worse, while the Trump administration is saying we're needed to protect the people and make sure LA doesn't fall into further chaos. What's your opinion on this extremely divided line?
At least internationally, is very interesting because the way it's being played out, with Mexican flags and Palestinian flags being waved off during these protests, it basically shows, and that is what the White House is actually exploiting, the fact that America is being invaded by foreigners and illegals, and all of this optics is actually playing into Donald Trump's rhetoric, especially to his electorate that elected him into and propelled him into power. The fact of the matter lies that what Trump is trying to say is that we need the rule of law to be instated, whereby immigration laws will basically catch hold of anybody who's flouting them and is illegally settling themselves in the United States, and they will basically be deported back. So all of this started on June 6th when ICE carried out multiple raids in multiple locations. I think the initial arrests were about 44 illegals, and that sort of propelled these current protests that we are seeing at this point. The protests should have been conducted in a peaceful manner. Largely it was, but there were massive amount of reports of downtown Los Angeles being quite violent, which the White House has again used as information to sort of justify it, galvanizing the National Guard and the Marines to go ahead and curb these protests. So what they're saying is their contention is, yes, First Amendment is fine. We do not have a problem with the peaceful protests. Where we have a problem is where the peaceful protests are basically providing cover fire to those indulging in mass criminality. And they're using incidents like what happened in 2020 in Minnesota, where a police station had been burned down to the ground, as one of those incidents to go ahead and galvanize this sort of National Guard and Marines. Joshua.
Yes, absolutely. Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth has spoken about this troop mobilisation, National Guard, Marines, both being utilised in LA. He says that it's lawful and constitutional, but on this programme we've had US experts who say that's not the case. Is this just the US administration saying what they need to move forward with the policies they want, including troop mobilization, or is what they're doing actually constitutional?
Well, when it comes down to the sheer legality of things, I think the Trump administration is well within their rights to go ahead and federalize the National Guards and Marines, because this is a case in point of time. I mean, it's happened previously in 1965. It's previously happened in 1992 as well. So there are legal precedents which the Trump administration will use if they were sued by any of the governors of these states, and they will make their case in the court of law to basically justify their actions as preventive and as preventive measures to ensure that citizens of the country are protected as a consequence, because law enforcement agencies do not have that kind of power or do not have those kind of resources available to their disposal to be able to settle down these kind of protests. Joshua.
Yes, and looking politically now, of course, LA is a hotbed and a flashpoint for these protests, which in points have turned violent. But further protests have taken place across the United States. There is widespread protest expected on Saturday across the country. How is this going to impact Trump politically, given that he won, of course, the presidency, the House, the Senate, but most importantly, that popular vote in the last election? These policies are divisive, and clearly there's a proportion of America that doesn't agree with them. What could be the impact for him heading towards some midterm elections?
Well, from a midterm elections perspective, I don't think this is going to impact Trump massively. In fact, on the contrary, I think this is going to benefit him, because the electorate, the MAGA voters who actually voted him into power, voted him primarily because he took a tough stance against illegal immigration, and for them, he is standing by what he's promised in his election rhetorics and his election campaign. His election campaign was all about I am going to be using force if need be to deport illegal aliens out of the United States, and that is what he's doing at the moment. So from a midterm election perspective, I don't think this is going to impact him massively. On the contrary, I think it's going to be yielding positive results, given the fact that he's actually doing what he's set out as a mission to basically do. The people who are predominantly against him are the typical liberal voters and the sort of left-leaning intelligentsia of United States, which is what is the worrying concern here. What they should be doing is they should be standing by the rule of law, and the rule of law basically suggests that if you are an illegal alien, then the state has rights to basically curb your access to public health or public benefits, etc. And that is what they're not doing. So they're basically providing cover fire to illegal aliens, which is, from an optics perspective, not great either domestically or internationally.
Yes, absolutely. And Adit, to bring an end to our discussion, of course, Trump's been very vocal on wanting to deport potentially millions of migrants, the use of Guantanamo Bay, the use of troops on the southern border as well to limit migrants coming in. Does this reaction from pockets within the US public show that it might not be as simple as Trump thought to carry out these foreign policies, irrelevant of what the courts say? Now the people are reacting, and could the people influence Trump's policy moving forward?
It's going to be easy, and I think Donald Trump knows that very well as well. He is, again, he's playing the optics hand as well. So he's trying to please his electorate. Long ago, he made this speech about, over 2 million illegals being housed in California as a consequence of what Judge Mariana Flazer had done in 1994, where she struck down a proposition called Bill 187, which was an initiative designed to discourage illegal immigrants by denying them access to public benefits. And he said this before. So all in all, from an optics perspective, he's going to be doing wonderful. Whether or not he'll be successful in deporting those 20 million odd illegal aliens living in the United States is something that we will have to wait and watch, Joshua.
Adit Qatari, thank you ever so much for providing that insight and joining us on the programme. We will, of course, bring you all the updates from North America as those protests nationwide continue to rage on. But we move on now to the Middle East, and the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says at least 5 Palestinian aid workers were killed after their bus came under attack near Khan Younis. Several others were reported injured and some may have been taken hostage. All victims were Palestinian staff delivering food aid. GHF, backed by Israel and private US security, began operations on May the 26th after months of an aid blockade. But the group faces criticism, with the UN and major NGOs refusing to work with it, citing ties to Israeli military objectives. Israel and the GHF deny reports of troops firing on civilians at aid sites. Meanwhile, tensions are rising near Egypt's Rafah border crossing as Israel calls on Cairo to stop 2 Gaza-bound activist convoys. Defence Minister Israel Katz warned that the protesters could provoke violence and threaten Israeli troops. One group, the Sumud convoy, has travelled from Tunisia through Libya and hopes to enter Gaza via Egypt, though Cairo has yet to grant access. Egypt says it supports pressure on Israel to lift the blockade, but insists all delegations must follow official procedures. A second group, the Global March to Gaza, plans a 50-kilometre walk from Arish to the Rafah crossing on Friday, with 4,000 expected to join. Several French activists were reportedly detained at Cairo airport and in hotels as tensions mount. Meanwhile, 4 French nationals detained by Israel after their Gaza-bound aid boat was intercepted will be expelled by the end of the week. Among them is Rima Hassan, a French Palestinian member of the European Parliament. She was briefly held in solitary confinement, reportedly for writing Free Palestine on a prison wall. The group was among 12 activists aboard the Madeleine carrying aid to Gaza. France's Prime Minister accused the activists of politicising the conflict, while opposition figures called for stronger government support. France and Saudi Arabia are co-hosting a UN meeting this month focused on steps towards Palestinian statehood. We'll listen in now to the French Prime Minister Francis Bayrou.
Quant à la flottille, je dois vous dire que ces militants ont obtenu l'effet qu'ils voulaient obtenir, mais que c'est une instrumentalisation à laquelle nous ne devons pas nous prêter. Je ne reprends aucun élément de langage de qui que ce soit. Je prends le seul élément de langage qui nous réunit, c'est-à-dire le regard des Français sur une situation inacceptable mais instrumentalisée.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed that Israeli forces have recovered the bodies of 2 Israeli hostages in Gaza. One was identified as Yair Yaakov, killed during the October 7th attacks. The operation took place in Khan Younis, based on intelligence from Israeli security agencies. Meanwhile, Israeli lawmakers have narrowly rejected an opposition-backed bill to dissolve parliament and trigger an early election. In a vote early on Thursday, 61 out of the 120 Knesset members voted against the proposal, while 53 supported it. The opposition introduced the bill hoping to force snap polls with support from ultra-Orthodox parties. These parties are upset with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the contentious issue of military conscription for deeply religious Jews. The closed vote highlights ongoing tensions within Israel's political landscape, but Netanyahu's government remains intact for now. In a major development on global trade, US President Donald Trump has announced that a new deal with China is complete, with big implications for tech, education and tariff policy. Trump says Beijing will supply the US with rare earth minerals and magnets crucial for defence and electronics, while the US will allow Chinese students to continue studying at American universities. Under the agreement, the US will put a total of 55% tariffs on some Chinese imports, including 25% in legacy tariffs and an additional 20% targeting fentanyl trafficking. China will respond with a flat 10% tariff on US goods. The White House says the deal builds on last month's Geneva framework and is still pending final approval from both himself and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Let's have a listen to what the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said on the deal.
his trade team, who did a fantastic job negotiating this on behalf of the United States and meeting with their Chinese counterparts. The president is talking to them about the details of it now. But what the president heard, he liked. China has agreed to open their markets to the United States separately of this deal. And when it comes to this deal, we're going back to the terms that were agreed upon in Geneva for the release of some of those critical minerals and the magnets from China to the United States. And we have agreed to fully comply with the Geneva Agreement as well. So the president is reviewing the details of that with his trade team now, and you'll hear more from him, I'm sure.
Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told lawmakers that China now has a singular opportunity to stabilise its economy by shifting to domestic consumption and remaining a reliable trade partner. Bessent also signalled that some nations could see extended tariff relief if they continue to negotiate in good faith. Let's hear what he said.
Dozens of countries have engaged the administration thus far with offers to improve their trade relations with the United States. This includes China. I have just returned in the middle of last night from successful negotiations in London with a Chinese delegation that will not only stabilize the economic relationship between our two economies, but make it more balanced. China has a singular opportunity to stabilize its economy by shifting away from excess production towards greater consumption. But the country needs to be a reliable partner in trade negotiations. If China will course correct by upholding its end of the initial trade agreement we outlined in Geneva, and I believe after our talks in London they will, then the rebalancing of the world's two largest economies is possible.
Well, as global markets watch closely, the deal marks a tentative step towards easing years of US-China trade tensions, but challenges still potentially lie ahead. Well, joining us to look at the ramifications of this deal and the potential international ramifications as well is Dr. Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute, who's joining us from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, thank you ever so much for joining. Let's first look at the international ramifications of this. Of course, a US-China trade war which has seen markets go in all directions, tariffs reaching triple digits. How do you think the world markets will react to what seems like an easing of those tensions?
This is, of course, an important step to adjust the situation. Without rare earths, the United States cannot produce high-tech machines. So that's why, in this case, the U.S. economy relies on China. But at the same time, we should not forget one fact. Since the end of the Obama administration, Trump administration, Biden administration, Trump administration continue to choose the tough policy towards China. So they are preparing the real competition between US and China. And in this case, as a long-term course, US is planning to decouple with China. But to do this, they cannot do decouple immediately. That's because of this, step by step, they need to choose a tougher position. That's why we can find one kind of ceasefire like this has happened. But ceasefire is not meaning the end of the battle between two countries. That is an important point also, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Nagao, we are shorter on time, but my final question to you relates to the wider tariff picture now. We've seen the US Liberation Day tariffs, which Trump announced, shocking the world and shocking the markets. It seems that has led to conversations. Trump saying that the July 8th deadline for that 3-month 10% extension which he put in before those Liberation Day tariffs take effect. Trump says that might be extended, with conversations ongoing with around 15 countries, including Japan as well. Do you think Trump has been successful with his bold tariff moves, given the fact that countries like China, Japan, the European Union, the United Kingdom all seem to be closer to a deal that might be more suitable for his America First policy?
They cannot fail. Trump administration cannot fail because they have already declared the tough measures towards this. So they must find something, the solution. But when we hear the intimidation from the Trump administration, we should not forget this is intimidation to deal. So that's why, of course, the level of the intimidation is very tough, but the reality is they can postpone the tariff if the negotiation going well. So that's why we should focusing on negotiation in this case, I think.
Absolutely. Dr. Satoru Nagao, thank you ever so much for joining us. We will, of course, bring you all of the updates on this pending US-China deal and further US trade deals as they happen. But we move on now, and tensions are escalating in the Middle East as the United States begins moving personnel out of the region, aligning deepening concerns over a possible conflict with Iran. President Donald Trump confirmed the evacuation, calling the area dangerous amid faltering talks with Tehran. The US has reduced embassy staff in Iraq and shifted additional personnel from Kuwait and Bahrain. Trump says he's now less confident in a nuclear deal, even as his envoy Steve Witkoff prepares to meet Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Amman this Sunday. Araghchi struck a more hopeful tone, saying an agreement to keep Iran's program peaceful is within reach if two conditions are met: the continuation of Iran's enrichment under IAEA watch and a full end to sanctions. But the stakes are high. Iran's defense minister warned that if talks fail, US bases in the region will be targeted, and with Israel also signalling a possible strike, the situation remains volatile. We move over to Europe now, and violence erupted for a third night across Northern Ireland, with clashes in Ballymena, Larne and Newtown Abbey. Masked youths attacked police, set cars and homes on fire, and targeted a leisure centre in Larne. The centre, sheltering families displaced by earlier unrest, suffered fire and smoke damage. In Ballymena, hundreds threw petrol bombs, fireworks and bricks at police. 17 officers were injured. In previous nights, police issued water cannons and dogs to control the crowds. Authorities labelled the attacks as racially motivated thuggery. Two teenage boys arrested for a serious sexual assault in Ballymena sparked this unrest. The violence threatens community safety and the ongoing investigation. Homes displayed signs identifying residents' nationalities amid rising fear of attack. Police are increasing patrols and receiving reinforcements from Scotland. Officials urge parents to monitor youths closely, while political leaders condemned the violence, calling it mindless and racist. Moving on now, North Korea has apparently stopped loudspeaker broadcasts targeting South Korea along the border. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said on Thursday. No North Korean loudspeaker messages were heard on Thursday, while the South Korean military continues to monitor Pyongyang's movements. South Korea itself halted its own loudspeaker broadcasts on Wednesday. These broadcasts, which included propaganda and K-pop songs, had resumed last year during heightened tensions between the two countries. The move to suspend loudspeaker use was ordered by new South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, who took office this month, promising to restart dialogue with the North. Residents living near the heavily guarded border have long complained about the loud noise, which they say causes significant disturbance. Both nations are now taking steps to lower tensions and work towards a potential peaceful dialogue. Heading to North America, and tensions appear to be cooling between former US President Donald Trump and tech billionaire Elon Musk. The White House now says Trump is appreciative of Musk's public expression of regret after their recent public fallout. In a statement, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that Trump took notes of Musk's comments and appreciated the gesture. She also said despite earlier warnings, no action has been taken to end Musk's government contracts. Let's have a listen to what Caroline Leavitt said.
The president acknowledged the statement that Elon put out this morning, and he is appreciative of it, and we are continuing to focus on the business of the American people.
Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance added that Trump was frustrated but doesn't want a long-term feud. He revealed he'd spoken to both men, trying to keep Musk on board as a supporter. Let's hear the Vice President's comments.
The President said very clearly, one is that Elon says some unacceptable things. I think the President is rightfully very frustrated about that. But he also wishes Elon well and has no desire to be in some long-term feud with Elon. I've spoken to Elon and the President about trying to ensure that Elon is publicly supporting and privately supporting.
Well, Musk, for his part, admitted that some of his social media posts about Trump may have gone too far. Trump called the apology very nice, hinting at a possible reconciliation between the two influential figures. Well, that's all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest news from across the world.